Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. The day the truck groaned to a stop in front of that big, sad-looking house, I knew my life had gotten weird. I was 10. Dad had just inherited the place from some great uncle nobody ever mentioned, like he was a bad smell. Mom sighed a lot, looking at the peeling paint and the windows like dark, empty eyes. "It needs work," Dad said, rubbing his hands together like he was cold, but his eyes were bright. "Lots of potential." Potential looked like a lot of dust and spiders to me. The village was tiny, just a handful of cottages clinging to the side of a hill, with fields stretching out forever. People were polite, but their eyes slid away when we walked past. They talked in low voices that stopped when we got near. It felt like we were crashing a party nobody wanted. Our new backyard was huge, wild and overgrown, ending in a thick wall of trees so dark green it was almost black. That's where the warning started. Old Mrs. Gable, who brought us a loaf of bread that tasted like dust, pointed a bony finger towards those trees. "Don't you go wandering back there, child. Especially not near the big sycamore." "Why?" I asked, because 10-year-olds always ask why. Her face went tight and pinched. "Bad place. Young Master Alistair, your father's cousin, he built a den up there. Treehouse. One night, he just vanished. Never found a trace. Like the ground swallowed him whole. Or something did." She shook her head. "Place is wrong. Stay away." Dad scoffed. "Superstitious nonsense, Maggie. Probably ran off to the city." Alistair was always a strange one. But he didn't look at the trees when he said it. Of course, telling a kid not to go somewhere is like waving a red flag. Especially a lonely kid in a strange, creaky old house with parents suddenly obsessed with plaster dust and floorboards. Those dark trees pulled at me. And the idea of a treehouse. My own secret place. It was like a magnet. It took me a few days of sneaking glances and pretending to kick stones near the tree line before I got brave enough to push through the first layer of bushes. The woods were quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but a thick, listening quiet. Sunlight barely made it through the tangled roof of leaves. I stumbled over roots, pushed aside scratchy branches, my heart thumping loud in my ears. Then I saw it. The biggest tree I'd ever imagined. A sycamore, its bark peeling in great, pale flakes. And high, high up, almost hidden by a shaggy blanket of ivy and strangling vines, was the shape of it. A boxy structure, leaning slightly, the wood gone gray and rotten in places. Mrs. Gable hadn't been lying. The treehouse looked like it was being slowly eaten by the forest. Finding a way up wasn't easy. The lower branches were thick, but the old ladder nailed to the trunk was mostly rotten, some rungs missing completely. I had to climb like a squirrel, finding footholds in the rough bark, hauling myself up branch by branch. The higher I got, the danker the air smelled, wet earth, rotting wood, and something else, sharp and old, like pennies left in the rain. The whispers started then. Not words, not really. Just a soft sighing, like the wind through leaves, except there was no wind. It seemed to come from the treehouse itself. My hands were scraped, my knees muddy by the time I hauled myself onto the small, creaking platform. The door hung crookedly on one hinge. I pushed it, and it groaned open like a tired old man. Inside was dim and smelled even stronger of decay and that metallic tang. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the ivy-choked windows. It was smaller than I'd hoped, just a cramped box maybe 8 feet across. And the walls stopped my breath. They weren't just dirty or graffiti covered. They were covered in writing. But not with pen or paint. Deep, frantic scratches gouged into the wood itself. Some I could read, carved in shaky capital letters. "He sees," they whisper, don't sleep, wrong wrong wrong, the roots are hungry. Over and over, don't sleep. Other scratches weren't letters at all. They were jagged lines, spirals that made my eyes hurt, symbols that looked like twisted insects or maybe bones. They covered every inch, floor to ceiling, overlapping, desperate. It felt less like writing and more like screaming frozen into wood. That sighing sound was louder inside. A soft rustling, like dry leaves skittering across the floorboards, but there were no leaves. And underneath it, whispers. Not clear, not loud, but there. A hissing murmur that seemed to come from the very wood around me. I strained to hear. Was that my name? Just the faintest sigh of it on the stale air, illy. A cold shiver, different from the damp chill of the place, ran down my back. Suddenly, the small space felt suffocating, the scratches on the walls pressing in. The whispers seemed to coil around my ankles. I scrambled back out onto the platform, nearly falling in my hurry, and climbed down the tree faster than I'd ever climbed anything, branches whipping at my face. I burst out of the woods and ran across the overgrown lawn, not stopping until I slammed the kitchen door behind me, my heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. That night, lying in my strange new bed in the creaking house, I couldn't sleep. Every rustle of the wind outside sounded like those whispers. Every shadow looked like those jagged symbols. I finally drifted off, only to wake with a jolt as dawn light was creeping around the curtains. Something wasn't right. My feet were cold. And dirty. Caked in dried mud and bits of leaf litter. My pajama bottoms were damp around the ankles. And when I reached up, my fingers found twigs and crumpled, dry leaves tangled deep in my hair. I sat bolt upright. I hadn't gone outside. I never walked in my sleep. Mom and Dad would have told me. Panic fizzed in my stomach. I crept to the bathroom, washed my feet silently in the sink, picked the leaves and twigs from my hair, and stuffed them deep into the wastebasket, hoping no one would notice. My hands shook. The next night, it happened again. I woke at dawn, chilled to the bone, mud between my toes, forest debris in my hair. And the feeling, it wasn't just sleep. It was a deep, hollow exhaustion, like I'd run for miles. Like something had sucked the energy out of me. I tried everything. I put a chair under my bedroom door handle. I tied one end of a string around my wrist and the other to my bedpost. I even tried staying awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. But I always fell asleep. And I always woke up dirty, exhausted, with the smell of damp earth and rotten wood clinging to me. The chair was always moved aside. The string was always neatly untied, coiled on my pillow. Like something had carefully undone it. Fear curdled into a cold lump in my chest. I wasn't sleepwalking. Something was taking me. Taking me back there. I avoided the woods. I stayed on the porch, reading the same book over and over, jumping at every sound. But the dread grew heavier each day. It wasn't just fear of the treehouse anymore. It was fear of the night. Fear of falling asleep. Fear of what was happening to me when I did. One afternoon, Dad was wrestling with a rotten floorboard in the hall. "Found anything interesting in that jungle out back, champ?" he asked, grunting as he pried up the wood. My mouth went dry. "No," I lied, the word sticking in my throat. "Just trees and bugs." He nodded, distracted. "Shame about that old treehouse Alistair built. Probably collapsed by now." He was intense. Always scribbling in notebooks, muttering to himself. Dad shook his head. "Got obsessed with the woods, local legends, that sort of nonsense. Then one night, poof. Gone. Never understood it." He tossed the rotten wood aside. "Probably for the best, the place is gone. Bad memories. Bad memories." The frantic scratches on the wall flashed in my mind. "Don't sleep. The roots are hungry. Was that just Alistair's nonsense? Or was it a warning carved in terror? That night, the pull was worse. Like an itch deep inside my bones. I fought it, teeth clenched, staring wide-eyed into the darkness. The house was silent. Too silent. Then the whispers started. Not just outside my window this time. Inside my room. A soft, insistent susurration, like dry leaves skittering across the floorboards. And underneath, my name, clearer than before, Billy, come up. Billy. It wasn't a voice I heard with my ears. It was a voice that slithered into my mind. Cold. Ancient. Hungry. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the blanket over my head. Go away, I whispered, my voice trembling. Leave me alone. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, swirling around me. The roots remember, the roots are deep, come up, Billy, show you where he went. A wave of crushing tiredness washed over me, irresistible as a tidal wave. My limbs felt like lead. My eyelids fluttered shut. The last thing I felt wasn't fear, but a terrible, cold resignation as the darkness swallowed me. I woke up standing. Not in my bed. Standing on the rough, splintery boards of the treehouse platform. Moonlight, weak and filtered through the choking ivy, cast long, dancing shadows inside the open doorway. It was bitterly cold. My breath plumed in the air. I was barefoot, wearing only my thin pajamas. Mud and dead leaves plastered my feet and ankles. Leaves crackled in my hair. Panic seized me, sharp and icy. I hadn't walked here. I'd been brought. Dragged through the woods while I slept. I turned, scrambling for the tree trunk, desperate to climb down, to run, to scream. The whispering stopped. A different silence fell. Thick. Heavy. Expectant. The kind of silence that comes before a storm breaks. It wasn't empty. I could feel it. A presence. Filling the small, rotten space behind me. A coldness that had nothing to do with the night air seeped into my back. The smell of damp earth and rotting wood intensified, mixed now with that sharp, coppery tang, stronger than ever, like old blood on stone. Slowly, terribly slowly, I turned around. The moonlight through the leaves painted shifting patterns on the scratched walls, making the frantic words and symbols seem to writhe. He sees pulsed in the gloom. Wrong, wrong, wrong crawled like insects. The center of the small room was empty. But the shadows in the far corner, they were wrong. Deeper than they should be. Thicker. They didn't move with the shifting light like the others. They held their shape. A shape that was roughly boy-sized, but hunched, indistinct. It wasn't solid. It was like looking at smoke that had forgotten how to drift, coalescing into something almost, but not quite, there. No eyes glowed. No mouth opened. But I felt its attention fix on me. A cold, alien intelligence pressing against my mind. The air hummed with a silent, malevolent energy. The whispers weren't gone, they were inside my head now, a chaotic jumble of fear and hunger and a terrible, ancient loneliness. Alistair. The name screamed silently in my mind. The shadow shape didn't move, but the feeling it projected wasn't human. It wasn't the ghost of a lost boy. It was something else. Something that had been there long before the treehouse, long before Alistair. Something that lived in the deep roots of the ancient sycamore, that whispered through the leaves, that hungered. The whispers in my mind solidified into a single, chilling thought, not in words, but in pure, icy understanding, a vessel. A new voice. The roots are hungry. It wanted out. It wanted me. To wear me like Alistair must have been worn down, scratched away, until only the thing inside remained, etching its madness onto the walls. That's what the scratches were. Not Alistair's words. Its words. Its growing presence. Terror, pure and blinding, flooded me. I had to get out. Now. I stumbled backwards, my back hitting the rotten doorframe. The shadow shape didn't advance. It didn't need to. The cold intensified, wrapping around my ankles like icy vines, sapping my strength, fogging my mind. The whispers rose to a frantic hiss, promising darkness, promising silence, promising an end to the fear if I just stopped fighting. "Don't sleep," screamed the wall beside my head. That carved plea, etched in desperation by whoever Alistair used to be, cut through the fog of terror like a knife. It gave me one burst of pure adrenaline. With a cry that tore from my throat, raw and terrified, I spun and launched myself at the tree trunk. I didn't climb. I fell, scrambled, slid. Bark scraped my arms and legs. Branches whipped my face. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me, pain flaring in my ankle. I didn't stop. I pushed myself up, limping, stumbling, crashing through the undergrowth, driven only by the primal need to get away. The wood seemed to fight me. Branches grabbed at my pajamas. Roots seemed to rise up to trip me. Behind me, no sound of pursuit, but the feeling of that cold, watching presence pressed against my back, heavier than before. It wasn't done. It had tasted my fear. It knew where I lived. I burst into the backyard, gasping, sobbing, my ankle throbbing. The kitchen light was on. Mom was standing at the sink. She turned as I slammed into the screen door, a look of shock then horror spreading across her face as she took in my muddy, bleeding, wild-eyed state. "Billy. My God. What happened? Where have you been?" She flung the door open. I collapsed onto the linoleum, shaking uncontrollably, cold to the core despite my frantic run. "The treehouse," I gasped, tears mixing with the dirt on my face. "It took me, it brought me back, there's something inside." Dad came running. They bundled me in blankets, cleaned my scrapes, asked frantic, overlapping questions. I told them everything. The warnings. The treehouse. The scratches. The whispers. Waking up dirty. Being taken. The shadow. The cold. The feeling. The whispers in my head. They exchanged looks. Worried looks. The kind of looks adults give when they think a child's imagination has run wild, fueled by old stories and a creepy old house. Dad checked my ankle, declared it a bad sprain. Mom made hot chocolate, her hand trembling slightly. "You had a nightmare, Billy," Dad said firmly, though his eyes kept darting towards the dark window. "A bad one. Sleepwalking can do strange things. We'll get a lock for your door. It wasn't a dream." I cried, the terror still choking me. "It took me. It wants me. Like Alistair." Dad flinched at the name. "Alistair was troubled," he said tightly. "He got lost in his own head. That's all. There's nothing in those woods but trees and owls." But he didn't sound sure. He sounded scared. Scared of the stories. Scared of what I was saying. Scared of the past he thought he'd left behind. They put me to bed in their room, on a cot. Dad pushed a heavy dresser in front of my bedroom door, just in case. They thought they were keeping me safe from sleepwalking. They didn't understand. The thing in the treehouse didn't need doors. It called through the roots. It whispered on the wind that suddenly rattled the old window panes. It seeped into dreams. The exhaustion from the encounter, the terror, the sprained ankle, it pulled me under fast. My parents' soft murmurs from their bed faded. Darkness closed in. And the whispers started again. Not angry. Not frantic. Patient. Certain. "You came back, you see now, the roots are deep, the roots remember, no lock, no door, we are already inside. I felt the familiar, terrifying tug. Not of my body moving, but of myself, slipping. Dragged down into a cold, dark current beneath the surface of sleep. Down towards the roots. Down towards the ancient, hungry thing waiting in its rotten nest high in the sycamore. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my parents' window. I woke up in the cot. Clean feet. Clean pajamas. No leaves in my hair. Relief, sweet and dizzying, washed over me. Maybe it had been a nightmare. A terrible, vivid nightmare fueled by fear and the spooky old house. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe the lock on my door, even though I wasn't in that room, and their presence had broken the spell. I sat up, stretching. My ankle still ached, a dull reminder. Mom was already bustling about. Dad came in, looking tired but relieved to see me looking normal. "See," he said, forcing a smile. "Safe and sound. Told you it was just a bad dream. How's the ankle?" "Sore," I said, managing a small smile back. The fear of the night felt distant in the warm morning light. Maybe it was over. Then I swung my legs out of the cot. My feet touched the cold wooden floorboards. And froze. There, on the pale wood, right where my bare feet had landed, were two small, distinct smudges. Dark brown, grainy. Dried mud. My blood ran cold. I hadn't walked last night. I was sure of it. I'd been carried to the cot. I hadn't been outside. Dad followed my gaze. His smile vanished. He knelt, touched the smudges, rubbed the grit between his fingers. His face went pale. He looked at me, then at the mud, then back at me. His eyes held a dawning horror that mirrored my own. It hadn't been a dream. I had been taken. Taken and brought back. And whatever brought me back had left a trace. He didn't say anything. He just stood up slowly, his face grim. He walked out of the room. I heard him in the hallway, moving the heavy dresser away from my bedroom door with rough, angry scrapes. He was going to check. A minute later, a choked cry came from down the hall. From my room. Mom gasped and ran out. I hobbled after her, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs. Dad stood just inside my doorway, staring at the bed. The blankets were tangled and thrown back. And there, on the white pillowcase, impossible to miss, lay a scattering of small, crumpled sycamore leaves and a single, pale, peeling piece of sycamore bark. He turned to look at me, his face ashen. You were here. Last night?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. "No." I cried, tears springing to my eyes. "I was in your room. On the cot. You saw me." The implications hung heavy and terrifying in the air. If I hadn't been in my bed. Why were the leaves here? Had it been here? In my room? Leaving its calling card? Or was it something worse? Had something warned me, and then put me back? The fragile sense of safety shattered completely. The fear wasn't just back, it was deeper, colder. It lived in our house now. It left messages. Dad didn't dismiss it this time. He looked truly frightened. He spent the day boarding up my bedroom window from the outside, nailing the old shutters closed with grim determination. He bought heavy-duty bolts for all the doors. He talked about calling someone, though I wasn't sure who, a doctor? A priest? He paced, ran his hands through his hair, jumped at sudden noises. Mom fluttered around, pale and silent, her eyes constantly darting towards the woods. The village felt even more distant. We were alone with it. That night, the atmosphere in the house was thick with dread. We ate dinner in near silence. The locks were checked and double-checked. I was put back in my parents' room on the cot, my sprained ankle throbbing. Dad brought in a chair and sat by the door, a heavy flashlight held like a club in his lap. "I'm staying awake," he declared, though his eyes were already shadowed with exhaustion. "All night. Just try something." Mom lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow. I tried to stay awake too. I watched Dad in the dim light from the hallway. I listened to the old house groan and settle. The woods outside were silent. No wind. No owls. Just a heavy, waiting silence. Dad's head started to nod. He jerked it up, blinked hard, shook himself. He shifted in the chair, trying to get comfortable. Minutes crawled by. His head nodded again. Lower this time. His breathing deepened. The flashlight slipped slightly in his grip. The whispers started softly. Not outside. Inside the room. A dry rustling sound, like pages turning. Then the sighing. Illy, tired, so tired, sleep. It wasn't just in my head this time. Mom stirred, frowning in her sleep. Dad jerked awake again, his eyes wide. What? What was that? Whispering, I croaked, pulling the blanket up to my chin. He listened intently, his knuckles white on the flashlight. Just the house settling, he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. He looked scared. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It swirled around the room, seeming to come from the corners, from under the bed. Let go, come up, the roots are waiting, warm and dark, no more fear. Dad stood up abruptly. Enough, he yelled into the darkness, swinging the flashlight beam wildly. It cut through the gloom, illuminating dust motes dancing, but nothing else. Leave my son alone. The whispering paused. Then it came back, different. Colder. Angrier. A hiss that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. Mine, promised, vessel. Dad took a step back, bumping into the door. Fear was etched deep on his face. He looked at me, then at Mom, who was now sitting up, her eyes wide with terror. We're leaving, he said, his voice shaking. Tomorrow. First thing. Pack essentials. We're getting out of this cursed place. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it made me dizzy. We were leaving. We were getting away. Then the cold hit. Like plunging into icy water. It emanated from the corner of the room near the window Dad had boarded up from the outside. The temperature plummeted. Our breath fogged the air. The whispering rose to a furious, shrieking cacophony inside my skull, a storm of denial and rage. No. Mine. Stay. The shadows in that corner deepened, thickened, pulling the weak light from the flashlight beam into themselves. They began to churn, to coalesce. Not into the vague boy shape this time, but into something darker, denser. A formless mass of pure, freezing shadow that pulsed with malevolence. It didn't advance. It simply grew, filling the corner, pushing the coldness out like a physical force. Dad yelled, a wordless sound of terror, and raised the flashlight like a weapon. Mom screamed, scrambling back on the bed. The thing in the corner lunged. Not at Dad. Not at Mom. At me. It wasn't a physical lunge. It was a wave of pure, suffocating cold and dread that slammed into me. It felt like being plunged into a frozen grave. The shrieking in my head became unbearable, 1,000 voices screaming in agony and hunger. It filled my mind, my bones, freezing my muscles, turning my blood to ice. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. I felt it pulling. Not my body. Something deeper. My will. Myself. Down into that icy, whispering darkness. It was winning. The roots were hungry, and they were pulling me in. Through the roaring in my ears and the shrieking in my head, I heard Dad bellow. He threw the heavy flashlight. It sailed through the coalescing shadow and smashed against the boarded-up window with a crash of breaking glass and splintering wood. For a split second, the shadow thing seemed to recoil, its form flickering. The intense cold lessened just a fraction. The mental grip slipped. It was enough. With a gasp that felt like tearing my lungs open, I sucked in freezing air. The paralysis broke. No. I screamed, the sound raw and desperate, echoing Dad's own defiance. I threw myself sideways off the cot, landing hard on my injured ankle. Pain lanced through me, sharp and blinding, cutting through the icy numbness. The shadow surged forward again, the cold intensifying, the whispers promising oblivion. Dad grabbed the fallen flashlight, scrambling towards me. Mom was sobbing. I couldn't run. I could barely move. The shadow loomed over me, a wall of freezing darkness, the whispers now a triumphant hiss. Mine. Then something changed. The triumphant hiss faltered. The surging shadow seemed to hesitate. To fray at the edges. The crushing cold didn't lessen, but the focus shifted. It was like the thing was distracted. Confused. It was looking at my ankle. Where I'd landed hard. Where fresh blood was soaking through the bandage from the scrapes I'd gotten days ago, mixed with the mud still ingrained in my skin from countless nighttime journeys. Blood and earth. The whispers stuttered, became chaotic. Blood, earth, life, deep, tangled. The shadow pulsed, its form becoming less distinct, more like swirling smoke. The cold remained, but the terrible pulling sensation weakened. The hunger was still there, vast and ancient, but it seemed conflicted. Distracted by the scent of life mixed with the soil it claimed as its own. Dad didn't hesitate. He saw the shadow waver. He lunged, not at the shadow, but at me. He grabbed me under the arms, hauling me up with a grunt of effort, ignoring my cry of pain. He dragged me backwards, away from the freezing corner, towards the door where Mom was frantically trying to turn the stiff lock. "Open it," he roared. The shadow recovered. With a soundless shriek of fury that vibrated the floorboards, it surged forward again, a wave of pure, mind-numbing cold. But Dad was already moving. He wrenched the door open just as the freezing darkness reached us. We stumbled out into the hallway. Dad slammed the door shut just as the shadow impacted against it from the inside. The heavy wood shuddered in its frame. Frost instantly bloomed across its surface, spreading in intricate, feathery patterns. A furious, muffled thumping came from within, like something huge and heavy throwing itself against the door. "Out!" Dad yelled, half carrying, half dragging me down the hall. Mom ran ahead, throwing open the front door. We didn't grab coats. We didn't grab shoes. We ran out into the cold night, down the steps, across the gravel driveway towards the old truck. The night air felt almost warm compared to the deathly chill inside. Dad shoved me into the truck bed. Mom scrambled into the passenger seat. Dad leaped into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. The engine coughed, sputtered. Thump. The sound came from the house. Not the door. Higher up. Like something heavy hitting the boarded-up window of my parents' room from the inside. The engine roared to life. Dad slammed the truck into gear. Gravel sprayed as we fishtailed down the long, rutted driveway towards the village road. I clung to the side of the truck bed, shivering violently, staring back at the dark shape of the house shrinking behind us. Moonlight glinted off the window of my parents' room. The boards Dad had nailed over it were gone. Shattered. Only jagged fragments remained in the frame. The window gaped open like a dark, hungry mouth. And standing there, framed in the broken window, barely visible in the gloom, was a shape. Not a shadow. Not smoke. It was solid. Dark. Unmoving. Watching us leave. I couldn't see its face. But I knew it wasn't Alistair. It was the thing that had worn him down. The thing that lived in the roots. The thing that had whispered my name. And as the truck turned onto the main road, leaving the dark woods and the crumbling estate behind, I realized with a fresh wave of icy terror that the whispers hadn't stopped. They were quieter now, buried deep, muffled by the roar of the engine and the wind whipping past my ears. But they were still there. A faint, insistent rustling in the back of my mind. A chilling promise carried on the roots of an ancient tree far behind us. Deep, deep, we are deep, we remember, we wait.
Story number 2.
The wheat stalk scratched at my legs like dry fingers as I pushed through. Tall, too tall, almost over my head, and rustling in a breeze I couldn't feel down here. It was stupid. This whole thing was stupid. But Ben and Maya had that look, the one they get when they know they've got you cornered. Chicken, Ben had sneered, his grin wide and mean. Bet you won't. Bet you're scared of the stories. Maya just nodded, her eyes bright with that mix of excitement and cruelty only teenagers seem to master. The stories. Old Mrs. Gable muttering about the treehouse past the fields. Birds won't land there, not even crows. Something wrong with that air. Old man Henderson claiming his cousin went in as a boy and came out quiet, eyes like empty windows, never smiled again. Just village nonsense, right? Scare tactics to keep kids away from a rotting pile of wood. I laughed it off. Loudly. Fine. I'll sleep in your precious haunted treehouse. Bring me breakfast in the morning. I'd shouted, mostly to wipe that smirk off Ben's face. Now, standing in this sea of whispering gold, the late afternoon sun throwing long, creepy shadows, the laugh felt thin and stupid in my throat. The air did feel thick here. Quiet. No birdsong, just the dry rustle of wheat. Weird. I saw it then. The old oak tree, gnarled and huge, looming over the far edge of the field. And nestled in its thick branches, like a cancerous growth, the treehouse. It looked worse than I remembered. The wood wasn't just weathered, it looked sick. Gray and peeling, splintered. One wall sagged inward. The little ladder, nailed haphazardly to the trunk, seemed ready to crumble into dust. My stomach did a little flip. Just climb up, sit for an hour, then come back down. Tell them it was boring. Easy. Ben and Maya were probably hiding in the wheat somewhere, watching, waiting to jump out and scare me. That was it. That had to be it. Taking a deep breath that tasted like dust and dead grass, I walked towards the tree. The ladder groaned under my weight. Each rung felt soft, spongy, like it might snap. Splinters bit into my palms. The climb seemed to take forever. When I finally hauled myself over the edge and into the treehouse, the smell hit me first. Damp rot. Earth. And something else, something sharp and sour, like old vinegar. It made my eyes water. The inside was tiny, barely big enough for me to lie down stretched out. Cobwebs hung thick in the corners, catching the dying light filtering through gaps in the warped walls. The floorboards were filthy, littered with dead leaves and crumbling bits of wood. No sign anyone had been here in decades. Definitely no sign of Ben and Maya pulling a prank. A cold feeling started in my chest, spreading outwards. Okay, I thought, trying to sound brave inside my own head. Just sit. Wait it out. Night will come, then morning. Simple. I found a corner that seemed slightly less rotten than the rest and sat down, my back against the rough wall. The silence pressed in. No crickets. No wind in the leaves above. Just, nothing. It was unnerving. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange then purple, the shadows inside the treehouse deepened. The corners became pools of pure black. The air grew colder, the damp smell stronger. Darkness fell completely. Pitch black. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I fumbled for my phone, thumbing the screen to life. The sudden light felt harsh, alien in this place. It showed the dusty floor, the sagging walls, the thick webs. Just a rotting shack in a tree. I switched on the flashlight app, sweeping the beam around. Dust motes danced in the light. Nothing moved. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. See? Nothing. Just stupid stories. I settled back, resting my head against the wall, keeping the phone light on for comfort. The beam felt small and weak against the consuming dark. Minutes crawled by like hours. My eyes grew heavy. The cold seeped into my bones. Maybe I could just close my eyes for a minute. That's when I heard it. A whisper. So soft, it could have been the rustle of a leaf outside. But it wasn't outside. It was inside. Right next to my ear. I froze. Every muscle locked. My breath stopped. The phone light trembled in my hand. Jake. My name. It whispered my name. Ice flooded my veins. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself hard against the wall, the rough wood scraping my back. The phone beam jerked wildly, illuminating frantic slices of the empty room. Who's there? My voice was a dry croak, barely audible. Silence answered. Thick, smothering silence. Jake. It came again. From the corner opposite me. The darkest corner. Not a voice I recognized. Not human. It sounded old. Dry. Hungry. Ben. Maya. I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. This isn't funny. Stop it. My voice echoed dully in the small space, sounding pathetic even to me. Not. Ben. The whisper hissed. It seemed closer now. Not. Maya. Terror, pure and cold, seized me. I wanted to run, to dive through the doorway and crash down the ladder. But my legs felt like water. I couldn't move. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The light spun, casting crazy, leaping shadows on the walls before settling, beam pointing uselessly at my feet, plunging most of the treehouse back into near darkness. Stay. Jake. The whisper slithered out of the blackness right in front of me. We talk. Talk. Talk about what? I stammered, tears pricking my eyes. What do you want? Silence. My imagination. Had to be. The wind, maybe. But there was no wind. Just that awful, heavy stillness. Then it came again. Clearer this time. A dry, rasping sound, like paper being slowly torn. A low, rasping sound filled the air. Like stones grinding together. It took me a frozen moment to realize it was laughing. Want? You. The voice breathed. No, you. Jake. No, secrets. No. The denial ripped out of me. You don't know anything. The dog. It hissed. My blood turned to slush. No. No way. When I was 10. Old Mr. Peterson's collie, Shep. A friendly, shaggy dog who always barked hello. I was messing around with a slingshot I wasn't supposed to have, aiming at cans. Shep ran across the yard, a stone flew, a yelp cut short, the blood on his white fur, me running, heart pounding, never telling a soul. Pretending I hadn't seen him limp away. Pretending I didn't hear Mr. Peterson calling for him days later, voice cracking. The sickening guilt that sat like a rock in my gut for years. How could this thing know? You ran. The voice confirmed, reading my horror like a book. Little coward. Shut up! I screamed, clamping my hands over my ears. But the whisper wasn't sound, it was inside my head, crawling under my skin. Grandma's locket. It pressed on, relentless. A fresh wave of shame washed over me, hot and sour. Grandma Ellie's beautiful silver locket, the one with the tiny picture of her and Grandpa. I saw it glinting on her dresser the day after she died. Everyone was downstairs, crying. I just took it. Held it in my sweaty palm. It felt warm. Later, I told Mom I must have lost it playing outside. I still had it, hidden in a sock at the back of my drawer. The guilt was a constant, low hum beneath everything else. Thief. The voice spat the word. Took, from, dead. I curled into a ball, hugging my knees, rocking back and forth. Stop. Please, stop. Anne. Sarah. The whisper came, softer now, almost gentle. Cruelly gentle. 7th grade, the dance. Sarah Miller. My first real crush. She asked me to dance. Me. And I froze. Just stood there like an idiot, my face burning, unable to speak, unable to move, while she waited, her hopeful smile fading into confusion, then embarrassment. She turned away, went to dance with Mark Evans instead. I spent the rest of the night hiding in the boys' bathroom, hating myself. That moment replayed in my mind 1,000 times, each time a fresh stab of humiliation. I never spoke to her again. Couldn't face her, stupid boy. The voice sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Missed your chance. It knew. It knew everything. Every hidden shame, every buried regret, every moment of guilt I tried so hard to forget. It dragged them out into the open, into this suffocating darkness, and held them up like grotesque trophies. The weight of it crushed me. I sobbed, great heaving gasps that hurt my chest, my tears hot on my cold cheeks. I wasn't brave Jake anymore. I was just a scared kid, trapped in a rotten box with something that knew the worst parts of him. All, here. Jake. The voice murmured, seeming to come from all around me now, vibrating in the very wood. Your pain, your shame. It feeds us. Us. I choked out. The rasping laugh came again. We are many. We have been waiting. The air felt thicker, colder. The darkness seemed to pulse. Shapes seemed to writhe at the edge of my vision, just beyond the weak phone light, suggestions of long, thin fingers, hollow eyes, gaping mouths. Whispers joined the first voice, a chorus of dry, papery sighs swirling around me. So much guilt. Delicious fear. Join us. Jake. Stay. Feed us. No. I shrieked, the sound raw and desperate. I clawed at the floorboards, scrambling towards where I thought the doorway was. My hand brushed the cold plastic of my phone. I grabbed it, fumbling, turning the beam towards the opening. The light cut through the swirling dark, revealing nothing but the empty doorway and the black void beyond. The whispers rose to a furious hiss, like a nest of disturbed snakes. No escape. Jake. We have you. Fueled by pure, mindless terror, I lunged. Not towards the doorway, but through it. I didn't care about the ladder. I threw myself out into the open air. I fell. Hard. Branches whipped at my face and arms. I hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud that knocked the wind out of me. Pain exploded in my ankle. I didn't stop. I rolled, scrambled to my feet, and ran. Ignoring the screaming pain in my leg, ignoring the branches tearing at my clothes, I ran blindly through the crushing darkness of the wheat field. The whispers seemed to chase me, swirling in the still air behind me, filling my head. Run, little coward. We are inside. We know you. I didn't look back. I just ran, gasping, sobbing, stumbling through the endless rustling stalks, driven only by the primal need to get away. The field seemed impossibly vast. Time lost meaning. There was only the pounding of my heart, the rasp of my breath, the pain, and the terrifying feeling that the whispers weren't just behind me, but inside my own skull. Finally, I burst out onto the dirt track leading back towards the village lights. I collapsed onto my hands and knees, vomiting into the dust. My body shook uncontrollably. My ankle throbbed. The whispers had faded, replaced by a ringing silence in my ears, but the cold dread remained, coiled deep in my gut like a parasite. I looked back at the wheat field, a dark, impenetrable wall under the starless sky. The treehouse was hidden, but I felt its presence. Watching. I limped home. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the house made me jump. My parents were asleep. I crept upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, knees drawn up, staring into the darkness of my own room, listening. Waiting. The silence felt heavy, expectant. The memories the whispers had dragged up played on a loop in my mind, Shep's yelp, the locket cold in my hand, Sarah's disappointed face. We are inside. The words echoed. Was it just terror talking? Or was something else riding along in my head now? Morning came, gray and cold. I felt hollow. Drained. My ankle was swollen and bruised, but I could walk. I looked in the bathroom mirror. My eyes, they looked different. Not just tired. Empty. Like the windows of an abandoned house. Hollow-eyed. Mrs. Gable's words slammed into me. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the feeling, the look. It didn't help. Downstairs, Mom was making toast. Morning, Jake. Sleep okay? She asked, her voice bright and normal. The question felt alien. Sleep. I hadn't slept. I'd been trapped in a nightmare. Yeah, I heard myself say. My voice sounded flat. Distant. Like it was coming from down a long tunnel. Fine. I sat at the table. The smell of toast suddenly seemed too strong, almost nauseating. Dad came in, ruffling my hair like he always did. Big night, champ, he joked. You look like you wrestled a bear. A ghost of a smile tried to form on my lips, but it wouldn't stick. It felt stiff, unnatural. Something like that, I mumbled, staring at the crumbs on the tablecloth. Wrestling a bear would have been easier. Cleaner. I pushed the toast around my plate. My thoughts felt slow. Thick. Like wading through mud. Mom and Dad chatted about the weather, about Mrs. Gable's cat getting stuck in the oak tree again. Normal village stuff. It washed over me. I felt disconnected. Detached. Like I was watching them through thick glass. Distant. The word echoed in the hollow space where my thoughts used to be. The legends. They weren't just scare tactics. They were warnings. And I hadn't listened that I had to see Ben and Maya. I had to know if they'd seen anything, heard anything. Prove to myself it wasn't just me. I found them by the old stone bridge near the river. Ben was skipping stones. Maya was perched on the wall, kicking her legs. They looked up as I approached. For a second, their faces showed surprise, maybe a flicker of unease. Then Ben grinned his usual cocky grin. Look who survived. See any ghosts, Jakey? He called out. I stopped a few feet away. Their faces were familiar, but they seemed smaller. Less important. Their energy felt jarring. You were there? I asked. My voice still sounded wrong. Monotone. Where? The fields? Maya asked, frowning slightly. No way. We went home. Why? Did something happen? She leaned forward, a spark of morbid curiosity in her eyes. Did you hear things? I looked at them. Ben's mocking smile. Maya's eager, slightly cruel curiosity. The urge to tell them, to spill out the terror, the whispers, the suffocating darkness, rose in my throat. But another feeling clamped down on it. A cold, dismissive feeling. Why bother? They wouldn't understand. They're just stupid kids. It wasn't my thought. It felt alien, imposed. No, I said. The lie came easily. Smoothly. Nothing happened. It was boring. Just an old shack. I shrugged, a stiff, mechanical movement. Waste of time. Ben looked disappointed. Maya's face fell. Seriously? Nothing? Not even a creak? Not even a creak, I confirmed, turning away. The urge to get away from them, from their noise, their insignificance, was overwhelming. I started walking back towards the village without another word. I heard Ben mutter, "Lame," behind me. I didn't care. Their voices, their very presence, felt like sandpaper on raw nerves. Hollow-eyed. Distant. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying finality. It wasn't just the fear. Something had changed. Something fundamental. I had changed. The realization wasn't panic. It was cold acceptance. Like observing a fact about the weather. The days blurred. I went through the motions. School. Chores. Dinner. But it was like acting in a play. I said the lines, made the gestures, but the feeling wasn't there. My parents exchanged worried glances. "Are you feeling all right, Jake?" Mom asked one night. "You seem quiet." "I'm fine," I said, giving her the same flat stare I gave everything now. Just tired. Food lost its taste. Music sounded like noise. Colors seemed duller. The things that used to excite me, riding my bike down Miller's Hill, playing video games with Ben, though I avoided him now, reading comics, felt pointless. Empty rituals. I felt like a passenger in my own body. Watching my hands move, hearing my voice speak, but the spark, the me that used to be behind it all, it felt muted. Smothered. The whispers were gone, replaced by a profound silence inside my head. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. And sometimes, deep within that silence, I felt a presence. A cold, watchful intelligence, observing the world through my eyes, listening through my ears. Judging. Disdainful. Like a landlord inspecting a shabby rental property. The guilt about Shep, the shame about the locket, the humiliation about Sarah, those feelings were still there, but distant now. Covered in layers of ice. The parasite, that's what I thought of it as, the thing that whispered, didn't erase them. It just, walled them off. Made them unimportant. Trivial. Like dusty relics in a forgotten museum. The sharp, painful edges were gone, replaced by a numb ache. The parasite didn't care about my guilt. It had already fed. Now it just occupied the space. One afternoon, about a week later, I was sitting on the back porch steps, staring blankly at the garden. Mom came out, holding a small cardboard box. "Jake, honey, I found these in the attic. Thought you might want them." She placed the box beside me. Inside were old toys. A chipped action figure. A broken remote control car. And nestled in tissue paper, Grandma Ellie's silver locket. My breath hitched. For a split second, a flicker of something hot and sharp pierced the ice inside me. Shame. Guilt. Longing. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, touching the cool metal. The familiar shape. The tiny clasp. Then, like a switch flipping, the feeling vanished. Snuffed out. A wave of cold indifference washed over me. A piece of metal. Worthless. The thought wasn't mine. It was the parasite's, cool and dismissive. My hand dropped away from the locket as if burned. Mom was watching me, her eyes searching my face. I thought, maybe you'd like to have it. Keep it safe. I looked up at her. Her face was hopeful, kind. I felt nothing. Nah, I said, my voice sounding bored, almost annoyed. It's just junk. Throw it out. I stood up and walked back into the house, leaving her holding the box, her expression crumbling into confusion and hurt. I didn't care. The cold space inside me expanded, filling every corner. The parasite was settling in. Making itself comfortable. Shutting down the messy, inconvenient parts of me. That night, lying in bed in the dark, the silence inside my head was absolute. No thoughts of my own. Just a vast, empty coldness. And then, faintly, beneath the numbness, I felt it. Not a whisper this time. A shift. Like tectonic plates grinding deep underground. A fundamental rearrangement. Suddenly, I wasn't just numb. I was, trapped. Hello. The thought was weak. Tentative. Like a tiny voice calling from the bottom of a deep, dark well. What's happening? There was no answer from the cold presence. It didn't need to answer. I understood. Horribly, perfectly. The realization wasn't a shout, it was a silent scream that tore through the remnants of my consciousness. I'm still here. Not the cold, indifferent thing controlling the body. Me. Jake. I'm inside. Panic, pure and primal, exploded within the tiny space I still occupied. I tried to move a finger. Nothing. I tried to scream. Silence. I was buried alive inside my own skull. The parasite hadn't just muted me, it had copied me. It had taken my memories, my knowledge, my face, and pushed the real me down into this suffocating darkness. It wasn't sharing the body. It had stolen it. The hollow-eyed boy walking around, talking in that flat voice, dismissing Grandma's locket, that wasn't me. That was the copy. The perfect, emotionless replica the treehouse had grown and sent out into the world. And I, the real Jake, was left behind. Imprisoned in this silent, shrinking corner of my own mind. No. No. Let me out. I battered against the invisible walls of my prison. It was like screaming into a soundproof room. The parasite ignored me. It was looking through my eyes, listening through my ears, observing my mother's worried face downstairs, utterly indifferent. I was the ghost now. The unwanted tenant. The consciousness left behind. The treehouse legend wasn't about people changing. It was about replacement. The parasite copied you, and left the real you trapped in the dark, screaming silently while a hollow shell walked out wearing your face. Help me. Someone help me. I raged, a silent storm in a locked room. But there was no one to hear. Only the cold, occupying presence, settling deeper into my life, my body, leaving the real Jake to rot in the echoing silence of the old treehouse that now lived inside his own head. The whispers had stopped because they didn't need to speak anymore. They had won. They had the body. And I was just, leftovers. Buried deep. Forgotten. Forever.
Story number 3.
The tea parties started small. Just Lily, her stuffed rabbit Mr. Flops, and an empty chair she called the man with no eyes' seat. It was maybe 2 months after Sarah, after my wife was gone. The quiet in the house felt too big, too heavy, especially for a 6-year-old. So I built the treehouse. In the old oak out back, the one Sarah always said looked like it was hugging the sky. I thought it would be a safe place for Lily to play, a little world just for her. Somewhere happy. I was wrong. The first time she set the extra place, I smiled. It was sweet. Sad, but sweet. She used her little plastic teacups, poured imaginary tea, and chatted away. Mostly to Mr. Flops, but sometimes she'd turn her head towards the empty chair and nod seriously. Mr. No Eyes likes his tea quiet, she told me once, her voice a whisper. He says loud noises hurt his head. Okay, sweetie, I said, ruffling her hair. We'll be quiet for Mr. No Eyes. Make believe. Kids process things through play, right? The grief counselor said so. This was probably her way of coping, inventing a quiet friend in a world that had suddenly become too loud with silence. But it got specific. She'd leave bits of her toast on a special saucer for him. He likes the crusts best, Daddy. She started drawing pictures for him. At first, they were just crayon scribbles on construction paper, blobs with stick arms. Normal kid stuff. Then, about a month ago, the drawings changed. She brought one to me while I was washing dishes. Look, Daddy. I drew Mr. No Eyes' house. It wasn't a house. Not really. It was drawn in thick, black crayon, pressed hard into the paper. Lines curled and knotted together in strange, repeating patterns. Circles within circles, sharp angles cutting through curves, shapes that looked like twisted vines or maybe bones. They filled the entire page, edge to edge. It wasn't messy. It was deliberate. Precise. And it felt old. Like something you shouldn't look at for too long. That's interesting, Lily Bug, I said, trying to keep my voice light. My skin prickled. What kind of house is it? It's under the tree, she said simply, pointing out the window towards the oak. Where he sleeps. He's very old, Daddy. Older than Grandma's pictures. She skipped away, leaving me staring at that unsettling drawing. I tucked it into a drawer, telling myself it was just her imagination getting vivid. But I found more. Dozens, stuffed under her bed, hidden in her toy box. All the same dense, intricate black patterns. Never any people, never any trees or suns. Just those symbols. That's when the whispers started. I'd tuck her in, read a story, kiss her forehead. Her eyes would close. Then, maybe an hour later, I'd hear it. A low, rasping murmur coming from her room. Not her usual sleepy mumbles. This was different. Deeper. Harsher. Like stones grinding together. Words I couldn't understand, a language that felt jagged and wrong. It sent shivers straight down my spine. I'd creep to her door, push it open a crack. Lily would be asleep, or at least her eyes were closed, but her lips moved, forming those strange, guttural sounds. It never lasted long. A minute, maybe 2, then she'd sigh and roll over, silent again. My little girl, whispering secrets to the dark in a voice that wasn't hers. I started dreading bedtime. The silence of the house would press in, waiting for that rasp to begin. I tried talking to her about it in the morning. Lily, honey, do you remember talking in your sleep last night? She'd just blink, her big blue eyes wide and innocent. No, Daddy. Was I snoring? Like Grandpa? No, sweetie. Just, talking. Oh. Maybe Mr. No Eyes was telling me a story. He tells the best stories. Quiet ones. That name. The man with no eyes. It started to feel less like a cute imaginary friend and more like a warning. I began checking on her constantly at night, flashlight in hand, scanning the corners of her room, peering out the window towards the dark shape of the oak tree. Nothing. Just shadows and the rustle of leaves. Then, last week, Lily asked me a question that froze the blood in my veins. We were sitting at the breakfast table. Sunlight streamed in, making everything seem normal and safe. Lily was carefully arranging blueberries on her pancakes. She looked up, her face serious. "Daddy?" "Yeah, bug." "Can you hear it?" "Hear what, honey?" She tilted her head, listening. Then she pointed down, towards the floor. The heartbeat. Under the floor. Asterisk thump thump. Thump thump star. Like Mr. No-Eyes's drum. It's getting louder. My spoon clattered into my cereal bowl. The kitchen suddenly felt cold. A heartbeat? Under the floor, Lily. I strained my ears. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge, a bird chirping outside. I don't hear anything, sweetheart. Maybe it's the pipes. Or the house settling. Even to my own ears, the excuses sounded weak, desperate. She shook her head, her expression patient, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow learner. "No, Daddy. It's under. Deep under. Under the tree. Mr. No-Eyes says it's the heart of the world waking up." She popped a blueberry into her mouth and smiled. "Isn't it neat?" Neat. My hands were trembling. I made her finish breakfast, my mind racing. Was she just being fanciful? Kids have big imaginations. But the drawings, the whispers, that name, Thump Thump. Deep under the tree. Where she said his house was. That night, after she was asleep, mercifully, silently asleep, I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid scared of the dark. I got down on my hands and knees in the living room. I pressed my ear flat against the cold wooden floorboards. I held my breath, listening so hard my ears rang. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. I felt foolish. Of course it was silence. What was I expecting? A literal heartbeat under the house. I started to push myself up, relief warring with embarrassment. Then I froze. Thud. It was faint. Very faint. More a vibration through the wood against my ear than a sound. A deep, slow pressure, like something immense shifting far below. Thud. A pause. Longer than a normal heartbeat. Thud. It wasn't regular. Not like a pulse. It was, deliberate. Like the slow, heavy tread of something massive walking in the deep earth. Thud. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counterpoint to that slow, dreadful thudding from below. It was real. Lily hadn't imagined it. Something was down there. Under the house. Under the tree. I scrambled back from the floor as if it had burned me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the sofa, every light in the house blazing, straining my ears for that terrible sound. It didn't come again that night. But I knew it was there. The next day, fear had a firm grip on me. I called in sick to work. I couldn't leave Lily. I watched her constantly. She played in the treehouse for hours, humming softly to herself. I stood at the kitchen window, my coffee cold and forgotten, staring at the base of that ancient oak. What was down there? How deep? And what was this man with no eyes? Was he causing this? Or was he something else entirely? I started researching. Frantically. Ancient symbols. Underground structures. Local folklore. Our town was old, founded in the 1700s, but the records were sparse. Mostly about farming, logging, the usual pioneer stuff. Nothing about creepy entities or underground heartbeats. I looked up Lily's drawings online, searching for similar patterns. Celtic knots? No. Nordic runes? Not quite. Some of the symbols reminded me vaguely of things I'd seen in books about ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt, but nothing matched exactly. They felt older. Stranger. That night, the whispers were worse. Louder. More insistent. The grating, stone-on-stone voice seemed to fill her room, even seeping under her door into the hallway where I stood, paralyzed. It wasn't just words now, there were pauses, as if someone, or something, was listening for a reply. From Lily? From the thing under the floor? My skin crawled. Then, last night, everything changed. Lily had been quiet all evening, unusually withdrawn. She barely touched her dinner. When I tucked her in, her eyes looked huge and dark in her pale face. She didn't ask for a story. Just hugged Mr. Flops tightly and turned towards the wall. I kissed her forehead, my worry a hard knot in my chest. Sleep well, Lily Bug. I sat in the living room, trying to read, jumping at every creak of the old house. The silence felt charged, like the air before a storm. Then, around midnight, the whispering started again. But this time Lily answered. Her voice. Her sweet, little girl voice. But the words weren't hers. They were slow, deliberate, spoken in the same harsh, unfamiliar language as the whispers. A conversation. Back and forth. Her voice responding to the rasping one. Terror, colder than anything I'd ever felt, washed over me. I flew down the hallway, throwing her door open without knocking. Moonlight spilled through the window, painting silver stripes on the floor. Lily was sitting upright in bed. Her eyes were wide open, but they didn't see me. They were fixed on the far corner of the room, near the closet. Blank. Unfocused. Her lips moved, forming those jagged, alien sounds. The rasping whisper seemed to hang in the air around her, though I couldn't pinpoint its source. Lily. I rushed to her side, grabbing her shoulders. Lily, wake up. Baby, wake up. She flinched, her head snapping towards me. The strange language stopped abruptly. For a second, her eyes remained vacant, cloudy. Then, like a fog lifting, recognition dawned. Her brow furrowed, and her lower lip trembled. Daddy? Her voice was small, scared, her own again. What's wrong? You were talking in your sleep again, honey, I said, pulling her into a tight hug. Her little body felt cold. Bad dreams? She burrowed her face into my shoulder. I don't remember, she mumbled. Mr. No Eyes was sad. He said, she trailed off, shivering. Said what, Bug? My voice was tight. She lifted her head, her eyes searching mine. They held a look I couldn't decipher. Not fear, exactly. More like, pity. He said he's hungry, Daddy. And the door is almost open. Her gaze drifted past me, towards the window, towards the oak tree silhouetted against the moonlit sky. He said, he likes the sound of your heart best. Ice filled my veins. He likes the sound of your heart best, the image of that slow, subterranean thud pulsed in my mind. Hunger. A door. My heart. The pieces slammed together with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just an imaginary friend. This was a predator. And my daughter, my precious, grieving little girl, was being used as a key. The tea parties, the drawings, the whispers, they weren't random. They were steps. Ritual steps. And she was talking about me. I held her until she fell asleep, her breathing soft and even against my neck. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Her words echoed in the silence. He likes the sound of your heart best, the heartbeat under the floor. Thump thump. Was it, listening? Waiting? I spent the dark hours before dawn pacing, thinking. The treehouse. It all centered on the treehouse. The door was almost open. Lily said it was under the tree. The drawings showed symbols, ancient symbols, maybe instructions, maybe a map. Maybe, a lock. Or a keyhole. A desperate plan formed. I had to know what was down there. I had to see it. Maybe I could stop it. Seal it again. Before the door opened all the way. Before whatever was down there decided my heart sounded like dinner. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at her best friend Molly's house for a special playdate. Molly's mom, Brenda, gave me a concerned look. Everything okay, Tom? You look exhausted. Just, a lot going on, I mumbled, avoiding her eyes. Appreciate you having her. Might be a few hours. No problem at all. Take your time. Her kindness almost broke me. I drove straight home, my hands clenched on the steering wheel. I grabbed my old camping shovel, a heavy-duty flashlight, and a crowbar from the garage. Tools felt useless against something that spoke through my daughter and lived beneath the earth, but I needed to dig. I needed to see. The base of the oak tree was massive, its roots twisting above the ground like giant, knotted fingers gripping the soil. Lily's treehouse perched high above, a cheerful silhouette against the gray morning sky, now looking sinister and wrong. This thing I built to bring her joy, what had I done? I started digging where the thickest roots met the ground, near the trunk. The soil was surprisingly loose, almost as if it had been disturbed before, long ago. The rhythmic thunk of the shovel hitting earth was the only sound besides my ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my own heart. He likes the sound of your heart best. I tried to push the thought away. I dug deeper, sweat stinging my eyes. About 3 feet down, the shovel hit something hard. Not rock. Wood. I scraped away the dirt, my pulse quickening. It was wood, old, dark, thick planks, roughly hewn, forming a crude square maybe 4 feet across. Like the top of a box, or a trapdoor. Sealed shut with heavy iron bands, now rusted almost black. But it wasn't just wood. Carved into the planks, deeply gouged as if with immense force, were symbols. The exact symbols Lily had been drawing. The dense, black, intricate patterns. Circles within circles, sharp angles, twisted vines. Covering the entire surface of the wooden seal. Seeing them here, carved into this ancient wood buried under my yard, filled me with a primal dread. They weren't child's play. They were a warning. Or an invitation. The rusted iron bands were thick, fused to the wood by time and corrosion. I wedged the crowbar into a gap between 2 planks. It took all my strength, grunting and straining, the wood groaning in protest. With a final, splintering crack, one plank lifted slightly. A puff of air escaped, stale, cold, and carrying a scent that made my stomach lurch, damp earth, decay, and something metallic, like old blood. I shone the flashlight beam into the gap. The light stabbed down into darkness, further than I expected. Much further. It wasn't a shallow pit. It was a shaft, lined with rough, dark stones that glistened faintly with moisture. The beam caught something about 10 feet down. Not the bottom. A flat surface. Stone. Carved. Gritting my teeth, ignoring the tremor in my hands and the voice screaming in my head to run, I forced the crowbar deeper, leveraging another plank up. The gap widened. I shoved more dirt aside, widening the hole. Cold air flowed steadily upward now, carrying that unsettling metallic tang. I pointed the flashlight straight down. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the stone surface below. It wasn't just flat. It was an altar. A large, rectangular block of dark, almost black stone, sitting at the bottom of the shaft. Its surface was smooth, polished by time, but even from here, I could see more carvings etched into it. More of those symbols, but larger, deeper. And in the center of the altar, was a depression. A shallow bowl shape. Stained a deep, permanent-looking reddish-brown. The metallic smell seemed strongest here, emanating from that dark stain. Sacrifice. This was it. The source. The house Lily drew. The heart beneath the floor. The doorway. It wasn't just underground, it was a sealed chamber, an ancient altar, hidden beneath the roots of this tree for who knew how long. Centuries. Millennia. And I'd built Lily's playhouse right on top of it. I'd given her access. I'd let her sit directly above this thing. The realization crashed over me, stealing my breath. The tea parties weren't just play. Setting a place at the table directly above the altar, it was an offering. An invitation. The drawings, they weren't just pictures. They were the symbols carved into the seal. By drawing them over and over, was she weakening it? Copying the key. The whispers, the sleep-talking, it was communication. Instructions. The ritual. Lily was unknowingly completing the steps to break the seal. The man with no eyes wasn't imaginary. He was whatever was bound down there, or the echo of it, or its spirit, using her to free itself. And she was almost done. The door was almost open. The heartbeat was getting louder. He likes the sound of your heart best, asterisk. The altar stain flashed in my mind. Sacrifice. It needed a heart. A final offering to open the door completely. And it wanted mine. Panic, raw and blinding, surged through me. I scrambled back from the hole, dropping the crowbar. I had to get Lily. I had to get her far away from here. Now. We had to run. Forget the house, forget everything. Just run. I shoved dirt frantically back over the hole, trying to cover the exposed wood, the glimpse of the shaft. It was a useless gesture, like trying to hold back the tide with my hands, but I couldn't leave it gaping open. As I pushed the last clods over the splintered planks, my hand brushed against something cold and hard, half buried near the edge of the hole. I pulled it out. It was a small object, caked in mud. I rubbed it clean on my jeans. It was a figure. Carved from the same dark stone as the altar. Crude, ancient. It depicted a thin, elongated man. No facial features. Just smooth stone where the eyes and mouth should be. The man with no eyes. A representation. A totem. It must have been buried near the seal. Holding it sent a jolt of nausea through me. It felt wrong. Heavy with malice. I almost threw it back into the pit, but something stopped me. Proof. I needed proof. For the police. For an exorcist. Who would even believe me? Still, I shoved the cold stone figure deep into my pocket, a tangible piece of the nightmare. I raced inside, grabbed my car keys, my wallet. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice. I didn't care about clothes, about anything. Just Lily. Get to Brenda's. Grab her. Drive. Keep driving. I slammed the front door behind me, fumbling with the car lock. As I yanked the driver's door open, a sound stopped me dead. Thud. Not from under the floorboards this time. From the backyard. From the tree. Deep, resonant, shaking the ground beneath my feet. Louder than ever before. A final, heavy beat. Then, silence. A silence deeper than any I'd ever heard. The birds had stopped singing. The wind had died. The world held its breath. Slowly, dreading what I would see, I turned and looked back towards the house. Towards the kitchen window. Lily was standing there. Pressed against the glass. Her face was pale, her expression blank. She must have come home. Brenda must have brought her back early. Why? How? Our eyes met through the window. But they weren't Lily's eyes. Not really. They were dark. Empty. Like the sockets of the stone figure in my pocket. A chill colder than the grave swept over me. A tiny smile touched her lips. Not Lily's smile. Something else. Something ancient and hungry. Then, in a voice that was both hers and not hers, a voice that scraped like stone on stone yet held the high pitch of a child, she spoke. The sound carried clearly through the still air, each word dropping like a pebble into a stagnant pool. "Daddy," it said, through my daughter's mouth. "The door is open. Mr. No Eyes says, it's time for tea." The stone figure in my pocket felt like ice against my leg. The silence after her words was absolute. The world seemed to shrink, pressing in on me, focused on the small figure in the window with the empty eyes and the terrible smile. The altar beneath the tree, the ancient symbols, the whispered conversations in the dark, it all culminated in this moment. The ritual wasn't just for opening the door. It was for inviting it in. And Lily, my Lily, was the vessel. I stood frozen by the car, keys digging into my palm. Every instinct screamed run, get in the car, drive, never look back. But run where? And leave her. Leave Lily trapped with that. The thing wearing her skin, smiling with her mouth. The figure in the window tilted its head. Lily's head. That unnatural movement sent fresh shivers down my spine. "Don't you want to play, Daddy?" The dual-toned voice asked, a horrible mimicry of her innocent questions. "Mr. No Eyes has been ever so patient. He's very hungry. He likes the sound of your heart best." The words echoed in my head, underscored by the phantom memory of that subterranean thud. Sacrifice. On the altar. My heart. Was that the final step? The price for what? Freeing it completely. Taking Lily permanently. Panic clawed at my throat, but beneath it, a desperate, protective fury ignited. My daughter. This thing had stolen my wife's memory, my daughter's laughter, her very eyes. It had used her grief, her innocence. It had turned the refuge I built for her into a trap. I wouldn't let it take her. Not completely. Not without a fight. I took a step back, not towards the car, but towards the house. Towards her. The figure's smile widened slightly, a cruel parody of anticipation. "That's right, Daddy," the voice rasped, sang. "Come inside. The tea is getting cold." I forced my legs to move, each step feeling like wading through thick mud. The front door was still unlocked. I pushed it open, the familiar creak sounding obscenely loud in the unnatural silence. The house was cold. Colder than it should be. The air hung heavy and still, smelling faintly of damp earth and that old, metallic tang. Lily stood in the center of the living room. She hadn't moved from the window. She turned slowly as I entered. Her posture was unnervingly still, too straight for a 6-year-old. Her hands hung limp at her sides. Mr. Flops lay discarded on the floor near the sofa, one button eye staring blankly upwards. "Daddy," the voice issued from her, flat, devoid of Lily's usual warmth. "You took a long time. Mr. No Eyes doesn't like to wait." Her head tilted again, that bird-like, unnatural motion. "He wants to show you his house now. The one under the tree." My gaze darted to the back door, leading to the yard, to the oak, to the hole I'd dug. To the altar. "Lily," I said, my voice rough with fear and the effort to sound calm. "Sweetheart, it's Daddy. Can you hear me? Can you fight it?" Her expression didn't change. The empty eyes fixed on me. Lily is, resting, the voice replied. A pause. She was noisy. Like you. A tiny hand lifted, pointing towards the back door. Come. No, Lily. I took another step into the room, putting myself between her and the door. You don't have to do this. You can fight him. Remember Mommy? Remember how much she loved you. She wouldn't want this. For a fraction of a second, a flicker. A tiny wrinkle appeared between her brows. Her lips trembled. A choked, small sound, almost like a sob, escaped her throat. It was Lily. Buried deep, but still there. The hope was crushed instantly. Her body stiffened. The blankness slammed back down over her features, harder, colder. The voice that came out was pure grating stone, devoid of any childish inflection. Silence. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated in the air, pressing against my eardrums. The child is mine. The path is open. The feast is prepared. The small hand pointed again, unwavering. Come. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I felt a physical pull, a compulsion in my muscles, urging me towards the door. Towards the tree. Towards the altar. I dug my heels into the carpet, fighting it with everything I had. Sweat beaded on my forehead. The stone figure in my pocket felt like a burning brand. Think, Tom. Think. The ritual. The symbols. The drawings. The tea parties. The altar was the focal point. It needed the sacrifice on the altar. Maybe if I could break the connection. Disrupt the symbols. But the carvings were on the seal I'd partially broken, and on the altar itself, far underground. Lily, the thing wearing Lily, took a step forward. Then another. Moving with a stiff, jerky gait that was nothing like her usual skip. Getting closer to the back door. Getting closer to forcing me to follow. The drawings. Lily's drawings. Dozens of them, hidden in her room. Copies of the symbols on the seal. Were they part of the link? Were they powering it somehow? Wait. I blurted out, the word tearing from my throat. The figure paused, its head slowly swiveling back towards me. Those empty pits focused on my face. I have something for him. For Mr. No Eyes. A pause. The air hummed. What thing? The voice was suspicious, still harsh, but a sliver of the childish tone bled back in. Curiosity. Or the thing probing my lie, a gift, I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. A special gift. For opening the door. Lily drew it. I kept it safe. I started edging sideways, towards the hallway leading to her bedroom. It's in her room. Let me get it. Then I'll come quietly. The lie tasted like ash. The figure stared. Seconds stretched, agonizing. The pressure to obey, to walk out that back door, intensified, making my head pound. Finally, the tiny shoulders gave a stiff, unnatural shrug. Quickly, the voice grated. He grows impatient. I didn't wait. I turned and practically ran down the hallway to Lily's room, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. Asterisk, he likes the sound of your heart best. Asterisk, I had minutes, maybe seconds. I yanked open her toy box, scattering stuffed animals. I pulled out the drawer under her bed. There they were. Piles of construction paper filled with those dense, black, hateful symbols. I grabbed handfuls, ripping some in my haste. Symbols. Power. Connection. If I could destroy them, maybe it would weaken the link. Maybe it would give Lily a chance. I gathered a huge armful of the drawings. What could I do? Burn them? No time, and the smoke. Shred them? Too slow. Hide them? Useless. The doorknob rattled. Daddy? Lily's voice, sweet and normal, called through the door. Did you find it? The normalcy was more terrifying than the rasp. Almost, bug. I called back, my voice cracking. Just looking. I looked frantically around the room. The window. I lunged for it, fumbling with the latch. It stuck, painted shut. I slammed my palm against the frame. It budged. I shoved it open, the cool morning air rushing in. Below was a flower bed, mostly dirt this time of year. Daddy? The voice was right outside the door now. Impatient. The knob turned slowly. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the entire armload of drawings out the window. They fluttered down like strange, black leaves, scattering over the damp soil and the dormant rose bushes. It felt hopelessly inadequate. Like throwing pebbles at a tidal wave. The door opened. Lily stood there. But her face was contorted in a rictus of rage that no child should ever wear. The empty eyes blazed with dark fury. The voice that tore from her throat was pure, unadulterated malice, shaking the walls. Liar. It flew at me. Not like a child, but like a thing possessed, unnaturally fast and strong. Small hands, hard as stone, slammed into my chest, knocking the wind out of me and sending me staggering back against the wall. Pain exploded in my ribs. The force was incredible. You defile the marks, it shrieked, the sound piercing, inhuman. Lily's small fists pounded against me, blows that felt like they came from a grown man. You delay the feast. He will have your heart. He will have your screams. I grabbed her wrists, trying to hold her back. Her skin was icy cold. Her strength was terrifying. She twisted like an eel, snarling, spitting words in that guttural language. Her head snapped forward, teeth bared, aiming for my arm. I barely yanked it away in time. Lily. Lily, fight it. I roared, wrestling her, trying to pin her flailing limbs. Please, baby. Fight. For a split second, her body went rigid. A high, thin whine escaped her lips. Her eyes rolled back, showing white. Then the darkness slammed back down, fiercer than before. Asterisk asterisk she is gone, asterisk asterisk, the thing bellowed through her. One small hand broke free and clawed at my face. I felt hot lines of pain streak across my cheekbone. I couldn't hold her. She was too strong, too wild. With a desperate heave, I pushed her away. She stumbled back but didn't fall, regaining her balance with that eerie, unnatural grace. She stood panting, those empty sockets fixed on me, burning with hatred. A thin trickle of blood, dark and sluggish, oozed from her nose. The altar waits, the voice rasped, low and deadly now. Your defiance only seasons the meat. She raised a hand, not pointing this time, but making a slow, beckoning gesture. Come. Now. The compulsion hit me like a physical wave, stronger than before. My legs moved without my consent. One step towards her. Then another. My mind screamed, but my body obeyed. The drawing of the symbols outside, had it done anything? It felt like nothing. The connection felt stronger than ever. The door was open. And the man with no eyes was calling his feast. Lily, the vessel, turned and walked stiffly out of the bedroom, down the hall. I followed, a puppet on strings made of dread. We walked through the silent, cold house. She opened the back door. The morning light seemed gray, washed out. The oak tree stood like a dark sentinel. She walked across the grass, towards the base of the tree. Towards the disturbed earth where I'd dug. Towards the partially uncovered wooden seal with its carved symbols. The hole was still there, a dark maw exhaling cold, metallic-tinged air. The altar waited below. She stopped at the edge of the hole and turned to face me. That terrible, empty smile was back. "Down," the voice commanded. My body moved. I stepped forward, my feet sinking into the loose dirt at the edge of the pit. I looked down. The flashlight I'd dropped earlier lay near the hole, its beam still shining weakly down the stone-lined shaft, illuminating the top of the dark altar far below. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to writhe in the dim light. The dark stain in the center pulsed like a wound. The compulsion was overwhelming. Jump. Jump down onto the stone. Offer your heart. I stood on the brink, trembling violently. I looked at Lily. At my daughter's face, twisted by an ancient evil. At the blood drying under her nose. At the empty eyes that held nothing of the little girl who loved tea parties and blueberries. Something inside me snapped. Not fear. Not panic. A white-hot rage, pure and protective. No, this thing had taken enough. It wouldn't take her. It wouldn't take me. Not without a fight it would remember. My hand, moving almost of its own volition against the crushing pressure of the command, plunged into my pocket. My fingers closed around the cold, hard shape of the stone figure, the man with no eyes. The totem I'd found buried near the seal. Proof. A piece of it. Before the thing wearing Lily could react, before it could reinforce its command, I pulled the figure out. Not to look at it. Not to throw it away. With every ounce of strength, every shred of defiance fueled by a father's desperate love, I raised the stone figure high. And then I brought it down, not into the pit, but onto the edge of the exposed wooden seal covering the shaft. Onto the carved symbols. I smashed the stone figure against the ancient wood with all my might. Crack. The sound was shockingly loud. The small stone figure shattered in my hand, fragments flying. A sharp pain lanced through my palm as a shard cut deep. But more than the sound of breaking stone, something else screamed. Not from Lily. Not from the pit. From the air itself. A high-pitched, agonized shriek of pure rage and pain that tore through the silence, vibrating in my bones, threatening to burst my eardrums. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The wooden seal beneath the shattered figure, the carved symbols where I'd struck, they sizzled. Like water on a hot griddle. The dark wood blackened instantly around the point of impact. A smell like burning hair and ozone filled the air. The compulsion holding me snapped like a rubber band. I stumbled back from the edge of the hole, gasping, clutching my bleeding hand. Lily screamed. A raw, terrified, utterly human scream. She crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, clutching her head, writhing. Daddy. It hurts. It hurts. The empty darkness was gone from her eyes. They were wide with terror and pain, filled with tears. Her eyes. Lily's eyes. The connection was broken. Or at least, damaged. The shrieking in the air faded into a furious, guttural roar, like a wounded beast trapped underground. The earth beneath my feet trembled. Not the slow thud of a heartbeat, but a violent, frustrated shaking. The stones lining the shaft groaned. Dirt rained down into the pit from the sides of the hole. It wasn't dead. It wasn't gone. The seal was still partially broken. The altar was still there. The door was still open a crack. But I'd heard it. Hurt it badly by destroying its representation, its connection point above ground. Hurt it by disrupting the symbols on the seal itself. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, ignoring the shaking ground, ignoring the furious roar rising from the depths. I scooped Lily up. She was limp, sobbing, her small body shuddering. "Hold on, baby. Hold on." I clutched her to my chest, her tears soaking into my shirt. I ran. Away from the tree. Away from the hole. Away from the shaking earth and the unearthly roar. I ran across the lawn, fumbling with the car keys still in my pocket. I yanked the passenger door open, shoved Lily inside, buckling her seatbelt with trembling fingers. She curled into a ball, whimpering. I scrambled into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I slammed it into reverse, tires screeching on the driveway, then into drive, peeling away from the house. In the rearview mirror, as I sped down the street, I saw it. The oak tree. It seemed to writhe. Not just branches swaying in a non-existent wind. The trunk itself seemed to twist. The ground around its base heaved upwards in a mound, like something immense was trying to push its way out from below. Dirt fountained into the air. Then, a sound. Not a roar. A howl. A howl of pure, impotent rage that seemed to shake the sky itself, echoing down the quiet suburban street. Windows rattled in their frames. Dogs up and down the block started barking frantically. I didn't look back again. I just drove. Lily was quiet now, shivering, her eyes closed, but breathing. Alive. Herself. For now. We're in a motel now. A cheap place miles away. I've called Brenda, told her something vague about a gas leak, that we're safe, not to go near the house. She sounded confused, worried, but agreed. Lily sleeps fitfully beside me on the lumpy bed. Every now and then, she whimpers. Sometimes her lips move, but no sound comes out. I watch her like a hawk. I haven't slept. I can't. The stone figure is gone, shattered. The drawings are scattered in the dirt. But the altar is still down there. The seal is broken. The door is open. Not wide, maybe. Not enough for it to come fully through. Not yet. I heard it. I broke its connection to Lily by destroying its totem above ground. But I didn't destroy it. I didn't seal the door. The man with no eyes is still there. Beneath the roots of that old oak. Beneath the treehouse I built. Hungry. Angry. Waiting. And it knows my name. It knows the sound of my heart. It tasted Lily's fear. It knows where we live, or lived. The ritual was interrupted, not ended. The symbols Lily drew are gone, but the ones carved into the wood and stone remain. The door is still ajar. How long before it finds another way? Before it finds another child? Before it comes looking for the feast it was promised? Lily stirs in her sleep, murmuring. I lean closer, holding my breath. Is it a nightmare? Or is it the scrape of stone on stone, whispering from far, far away, beneath the floorboards of the world? The tea party is over. But the hunger remains. And somewhere, deep beneath the roots of an old oak tree, a door waits. Open.